Those were sure some pretty words that the people of Israel had for David today. Here we are, your bone and your flesh. Pretty words, speaking of a closeness, a bond of love between God's anointed king and the people he's been called to shepherd. The words remind us of Adam's reaction when he first laid eyes on Eve, having seen nothing but plants and animals, and now looking at the beauty of a woman for the first time. At last, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Yes, some very pretty words were spoken here at Hebron as David claimed his throne as king of Israel. Words that sound like celebration. Words that speak of something new, the coming together of a new family. But to tell you the gospel truth, I don't think we'd like it very much there at Hebron. It's not just because David is a traitor to King Saul, a collaborator with the enemy Philistines, and a bandit who has been running a protection racket on the outskirts of town, though there's plenty there that we could and probably should talk about. It's not just because the last king, Saul, was rejected by the prophets for the crime of refusing to massacre innocent men, women, and children among his enemies, though there's plenty there we could and probably should talk about. It's not just because David is walking to his throne over the corpses of tens of thousands who have been slain in a brutal and destructive civil war, having long since melted his plowshares into swords, though there's plenty there that we could and probably should talk about. It's more basic than any of that. David's enthronement is the start of something radically new in his society. And us? Well, we don't much care for new around here, do we? New can only make things worse, after all, when old works just fine for us. We've worked hard, and the generations that came before us have worked hard. Our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents that risked so much to travel across the sea to find this little place in the rolling hills of southern Indiana. They worked hard to build this town into what it is, a nice place to call home. We love our town. We love the way we do things, and we're right to do so. Now, we know that some people who like to think of themselves as elite may have some funny ideas about us in our little town. That we're just flyover country, that we're a little backward and behind the times, that we need them to tell us how to live our lives. But then I don't guess that what they think about us and their towers on the coasts matter to us half a hill of beans, does it? See, they can laugh and snicker all they want, but in our town, we love our God, love our country, love our families. In our town, we respect the farmers that feed our country, the workers who build our infrastructure, and the over-the-road truckers who are the lifeblood flowing in the veins of this land. Here, we support the troops that defend our freedom and look mighty skeptically at anyone who sounds like he wants to take them away. They can laugh and snicker all they want, but we have fairly full churches and fairly empty jail cells. Our streets are safe at night. Our families may not be perfect. None are. Not that that's any of their business. But we still believe in families and work hard to keep them together. We have our traditions. They work for us, and we intend to conserve them. As long as you can still get a slice of pie and a cup of coffee down at Rita's, we just as soon leave things be. So no, we wouldn't like it much at Hebron. We wouldn't like a new dynasty like David's. That would mean pulling Old Glory down from the courthouse, and raising some strange new flag. That would mean turning Rita's Diner into some foo-foo artisanal kale and acorn smoothie shop. You truckers are going to have to park your rigs and open up interpretive dance studios. And you farmers can stay in business so long as you switch to growing, well, kale and acorns. And we may as well board up the churches, though you're free to hike it up to Los Angeles and worship at the new temple there anytime you get the notion to. A new dynasty, bringing a radical newness to our society, thrusting on us progress that smells an awful lot like their own weirdness, and tossing our traditions aside. No, we wouldn't like it at Hebron much at all. Out with the new, in with the old, and that's just the way we like it. Only it's not, and we know that. A lot of things bring us here on Sunday morning, and one of them is tradition. We follow Jesus because it's just what we do, what we've always done, what our parents and grandparents did. And that's okay. That shouldn't be it for us, but it's okay. Tradition is good. That old-time religion is a good thing. But what does Jesus say? Behold, he says in Revelation chapter 21 and verse 5, behold, I am making all things new. The holy book we read, or at least agree that we ought to be reading, is the New Testament. At Eucharist, we receive the cup of the blood of the new and everlasting covenant. A voice of newness makes us uncomfortable. We like our traditions, and we don't like them challenged. But we know that sometimes they need to be. Look back 100 years, and while we honor those who came before us, we find Christians condemning one another as false disciples, damning each other to hell because the signs in front of their church had different names on them. We know the old wasn't right. Look at how black people and other minorities were treated. We know the old wasn't right. Look at how women were excluded from full participation in society, and we know the old wasn't right. Go back further, 500 years, 1,000 years, and we find Christians marching in wars of conquest and calling them holy. Christians burning people alive for having new ideas. Now, we know the old wasn't right. And don't even get me started on how we've treated the Jewish people over the centuries. See, the same attachment to tradition that keeps us safe like a mother's warm embrace can turn cold, crushing the life out of our very souls, if we do not listen to the newness offered to us that is the very voice of God. Jesus points us to the dynamic love of the God who is the ground of our being, a beauty both ever ancient and ever new, inviting us, as the hymn tells us, to each day sing a new church into being. Jesus, Son of David, reigns in the place of his earthly father, and in his reign he is challenged, overturned, and made new the very idea of kingship itself. David seized power the only way his tradition showed him, with a fist of iron, like Stalin or Emperor Palpatine. Jesus frees us from the shackles of a tradition grown cancerous by turning kingship into self-emptying, self-gift, rather than self-aggrandizement. His throne is the cross, and his imperial decree is, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. by hearing that voice, not just on the today 2,000 years ago, but on this today, on every today, we are freed to live in the paradise of divine love. By not fearing Christ's newness, the newness of self-gift, the newness of love, the newness of outreach and inclusion, we don't lose the old, we don't reject tradition, but we live the old. We hand on tradition in a way everlastingly new, covenanted to God, to one another, to all humankind, and all creation, as flesh of our flesh and bone of our bone. For freedom, Christ has set us free. For liberation, Christ has liberated us. And now Christ invites us to lay down our fears and hear the newness he would speak to us. On the cross where he reigns as king, he shows us that we can serve our traditions when and because they empower us to progress toward full flourishing, full human dignity. All that we love about our way of life here in our little town is good. Christ isn't David. He doesn't command that we give up high school football and go watch hula hoopers and drum circles instead, unless that's what we want. But he challenges us to risk the discomfort of asking who it is that we're still excluding from full, conscious, and active participation in our lives in this place that is truly a nice place to call home. Here we are, your bone and your flesh. Pretty words, and they are for everyone.